Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got another one of these stories sent to me by everyone. And by everyone, I mean everyone. If you didn't send me the story, consider yourself special. San Francisco man gets red zone parking ticket after curb was repainted while his car was parked. Remember, the white zone is for the loading and unloading of passengers only. But the red zone, you can't park there in San Francisco. This story is from ABC 7 out of Los Angeles, ironically. And Dion Lim wrote this. A San Francisco man is fighting a ticket for parking in a red zone after the curb was repainted red while his car was parked in the spot. Now, this is a little misleading, and I'll clarify for you. But the story that most people have heard is that there's a legal parking spot, guy parks his car there, somebody comes by later, paints the curb red, and tickets him for $180, which doesn't seem fair because the thinking is it was legal to park the car there when it was parked. And that's the argument that the city's making. They're saying it wasn't. So here we go. The Jollies have lived in the city for decades and know the challenges of finding a parking space in their neighborhood. And I talked about another problem with a parking pad in front of somebody's residence in San Francisco recently, and the big fight that took place over that. But this is a little different. There's a space at the corner of Larkin and Union that has always been their go-to when it's open. Well, yeah, anytime it's open, I've been parking there for 25 years, Jeff said. But what happened to the pair 1 week ago was a first. We came out, we were walking up from the store, and I noticed the ticket on my car, Desiree said. Upon closer inspection on the windshield of her Honda sedan was a $180 fine for parking in a red zone. One that Desiree and Jeff say wasn't there when she parked a couple of days earlier or in years past. They parked there many times, they say. So she said, if it was warranted, I don't have a problem with it, but this seems unfair to me. The red stripe is there where it wasn't before, and they had the nerve to just go around my tire. She described pointing out a small patch that the paint shop missed when they avoided painting the Honda's tire. And by paint shop, she means the people who came by and painted the curb, okay? This is an amusing detail to Jeff, who by trade is a painter. So he says, I recognize that is the mistake a painter makes, or maybe not a mistake, but working around something, didn't want to get paint on the tire of the car, which by the way is a good thing, but there's a little spot they missed because the car was parked there. So he said, I saw that, and I even have painter friends who I say, showed them this, and they said, what a bad job that was. They missed a spot. Now, ABC 7 News, the sister station in San Francisco to ABC 7 Los Angeles, spoke to Erica Cato, a spokesperson for SFMTA, who confirms the ticket is for a red zone violation, but in an interesting twist, it's not for the newly painted red stripe. She says the violation is for parking in an old faded one because she says it's always been a red zone. It's just that the red wasn't painfully obvious before it was touched up recently. SFMTA provided a photo of the faded red zone parking spot to illustrate that the red zone did previously exist and preceded that fresh paint job. While the curb in the image shows some red spots, they are quite faint. SFMTA also provided ABC 7 News with a service request to repaint the stripe and an image showing how worn the red paint was. So the city recognized the paint was getting faded. They slapped on some new red paint, and they slapped down a ticket. Now, ABC 7 News examined that same spot using Google Maps Street View images, looking at pictures from 2016 and 2021. The red paint on the curb is there, but is completely faded away, so the curb looks gray. Because the couple contested the ticket, SFMTA tells ABC 7 it's up to the citations clerk to determine what happens next. It could be enforced or it could be dismissed. It's a process that could take up to 60 days. Desiree says, I'm going through chemotherapy right now, so it's like I'm worried about other things, and now I have to worry about this. Jeff and Desiree said after all the challenges of living in the city lately, this could be their final straw. Among other things, someone stole the catalytic converter off their car. These people are like a vortex of my show. Jeff says, we do want to leave because of all this stuff that goes on in the city. They plan to be moving to France sometime in the future. So they've had a lot of bad stuff happen. This parking ticket, which seemed odd at first, the explanation, I can understand this. But of course, it does seem unfair to ticket the car that is there while the paint is being refreshed if the paint wasn't terribly visible the first time around. I'm going to make this offer, by the way. If these people get hit with a $180 ticket for this, I'll pay it. So if anybody hears a follow-up to the story, anything other than that the ticket gets waived, I'll pay it. So let me know. I'll send them a check for $180. But meanwhile, this raises an interesting point. And a while back, I used the phrase, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And I actually had somebody write me a very, very passionate email saying that I didn't understand what that meant, which is odd because I didn't really explain what it meant. I simply just said, well, ignorance of the law is no excuse, which, by the way, is one of those legal sayings that everyone knows. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. And generally speaking, it means that if you got arrested for something or accused of a crime, you can't go, I didn't know that was illegal. And they're not going to go, oh, you didn't know? Okay, it's okay, we'll let you go. That's the primary meaning of the phrase, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So there is a subpart to that you should be aware of. Generally speaking, although you're presumed to have knowledge of law, as we know, there are a lot of laws out there. And in fact, there's so many the average person can't keep track of them all. But when a law gets passed, for instance, you'll often see it say, this law takes effect 6 months from this date. Why 6 months? One reason is so they can get word out about the change to the law. So you should be on notice on some level that there's a new law out there. But let me give you a better example that I think you can relate to. Let's suppose there's a stretch of road, okay? The speed limit is 25 here, and it drops to 15 for some odd reason right here. Then it goes back up to 25 right here. And there's speed limit signs, 25, 15, 25. One day you're driving through there and you've never driven through there before, and hoodlums, vandals, have removed the middle sign saying speed limit drops to 15. And a cop with a radar gun sitting right over here in the bushes, and you go blown by at 25 miles an hour. And he pulls you over and says, how fast are you going? You go 25. And he goes, really? Well, speed limit's 15. And you go, well, the last sign I saw said 25. He goes, nope, it drops to 15 right there in the middle. And you go, that's crazy. I didn't see any signs. He goes, oh, well, looks like the sign's down, but you know something? It does drop to 15. So you're on the hook for that and writes you a ticket for that. You can go to court and argue and say there's no way that you could be on notice of that drop in the speed limit because the sign is missing. How else would you do that? Now, that's a rare example. And to try to say, for instance, well, I committed aggravated, assault and I didn't know that was illegal. That's not going to fly, even if the law books that it's written in are very obscure and dusty and buried in the basement of a library, okay? But everyone knows that when you're driving down the road, certain traffic instructions, for lack of a better word, are posted. And so you want to know what the speed limit is, you look at the signs. You want to know to do an intersection, you look for stop signs, you look for lights, So the fact of the matter is that the speed limit drops, but you'd have no way of knowing it. You could argue and say the lack of notice gets you off, and that's not an ignorance of the law. It's just something you could not be expected to know. And your lack of knowledge in that instance does not equate directly to being ignorant. It's just that you don't know something. And most people would expect that to be posted. And the fact that vandals or hoodlums removed that sign wouldn't mean that, oh, well, it's too bad you get that ticket. So you might get the ticket, but I think you can beat that one in court. So as for these people here, if this curb was not visible as a red curb when they parked the car and then they come by and paint it red and give them a ticket, yeah, that seems bogus. But if it's been a red curb all along, but just to varying degrees of brightness of red, well, that's an interesting issue, especially if, did they ever ticket anyone at that curb before, or did they literally wait till the brand new paint went down and then they did it for the first time in 20 years? That's the issue. So there you go. It's a crazy story out of San Francisco. home of the parking problems to beat all parking problems. ABC7 Los Angeles ran the story. Everyone sent it to me. Like I said, if they get charged the $1.80, I'll pay it. San Francisco man gets red zone parking ticket after curb was repainted while his car was parked. Dion Lim wrote it, and everyone sent it to me. Thank you, everyone. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Put off everything until tomorrow. You've made enough mistakes today.